My name is Daniel, and up until 6 months ago, we lived a quiet life in Oak Ridge Estates, a gated community with immaculate lawns and rigid rules enforced by an overzealous homeowners association. My wife Elaine and her identical twin sister Catherine had always been inseparable. They shared everything: birthday celebrations, inside jokes, and even the same laugh that would fill a room with warmth. That all ended when Catherine's car was hit by a drunk driver on her way home from work. She died instantly, according to the police. One moment she existed, and the next, half of my wife's soul was gone. Elaine stopped sleeping. She barely ate. It was as if someone had switched off her light. I keep reaching for my phone to call her, Elaine whispered one night, staring blankly at the ceiling. I keep forgetting she will not answer. The weekend after the funeral, we decided to hold a small neighborhood vigil in our front yard. Nothing excessive, just some candles, a few chairs, and a portrait of Catherine surrounded by flowers. A handful of neighbors and Catherine's closest friends gathered as the sun began to set. The atmosphere was solemn but comforting, exactly what Elaine needed. She would have hated all this attention, Elaine said, attempting a smile that did not reach her eyes, but she would have appreciated everyone showing up. The soft murmur of shared memories filled our front yard as darkness fell. People spoke in hushed tones about Catherine's kindness, her dedication as a kindergarten teacher, her infectious laugh. For the first time since the accident, I saw Elaine's shoulders relax slightly. Then came the sharp click of heels against pavement. Excuse me, what exactly is going on here? The crowd parted reluctantly, revealing Karen Westfield, president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, and her eyes narrowed as she surveyed our gathering with undisguised contempt. Ms. Westfield, I began, keeping my voice even. We are holding a memorial for my wife's sister. We informed the community board last week. Karen glanced at her clipboard. I do not see any approved request for a public gathering. All events must be submitted in writing 14 business days in advance. Elaine stood up shakily. Please, Karen, it is just a small vigil. We will be finished soon. This is a direct violation of HOA Code 15B regarding unauthorized gatherings. Not to mention these candles are a fire hazard and completely against regulation, Karen continued, gesturing dismissively toward the memorial setup. And the vehicles parked along the curb are creating a traffic hazard. One of Catherine's friends stepped forward. Have some compassion, they just lost. Rules are rules, Karen cut her off sharply. This neighborhood maintains its property values because we enforce standards. You have 15 minutes to disperse this gathering. Elaine's face crumpled. The fragile composure she had maintained shattered completely. She sank to her knees beside Catherine's portrait, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to tear through her. I placed myself between Karen and my wife. This is our property. We are not disturbing anyone. Please leave us be, just for tonight. Karen's nostrils flared. This is not about your property. This is about community standards that you agreed to when you signed your homeowner documents. This gathering is unauthorized and must end immediately. Karen, please, I tried again, lowering my voice. Have a heart, my wife is grieving. Do not make me call the authorities, she threatened, her voice rising. I will not have the reputation of Oak Ridge Estates compromised by emotional displays. Something in me snapped, get off our property now. Karen's eyes widened at my tone, then narrowed dangerously. You will regret speaking to me that way. She turned sharply and stalked away, phone already pressed to her ear. Yes, hello, I need to report a disturbance. Our friends tried to comfort Elaine, but the evening was ruined. The peaceful atmosphere had been shattered by Karen's intrusion. 20 minutes later, 2 men in what appeared to be police uniforms approached our yard. We have received complaints about a disturbance, one announced loudly. But something was not right. Their badges looked off, the metal too dull, the embossing amateur. Their uniforms did not match any department I recognized. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what was happening. Karen had not called real police, she had called imposters. Everyone needs to disperse immediately. the taller fake officer commanded, his hand resting purposefully on what looked like a genuine holster. This gathering violates local ordinances. I studied them carefully, their posture, their equipment, the way they surveyed the scene. The shorter one had a badge number that did not follow the correct formatting for our county. Their patches were slightly misaligned and their utility belts lacked standard-issue equipment. "May I see your identification?" I asked calmly. The taller fake officer frowned. "Sir, we are not here to have our authority questioned. We are responding to multiple noise complaints and unauthorized assembly." Elaine was still on her knees, surrounded by flickering candles, tears streaming down her face. "This is for my sister," she explained, her voice breaking. "We are not making any noise, we are just remembering her." The shorter fake officer stepped toward her. "Ma'am, you need to stand up and comply. This gathering needs to end now." He reached down and grasped her arm roughly, attempting to pull her to her feet. Elaine cried out in pain and surprise. I moved instantly, placing my hand firmly on his wrist. "Take your hands off my wife," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Now." The fake officer released her and squared up to me. "Are you obstructing an officer in the performance of his duties? That is a serious offense." Our neighbors began murmuring, some backing away nervously, others pulling out phones to record what was happening. From the corner of my eye, I saw Karen standing at the edge of our property, arms crossed, observing the scene with smug satisfaction. "I am asking to see proper identification before you manhandle a grieving woman on private property," I insisted, not backing down. "What precinct are you from? Who is your commanding officer?" The fake officers exchanged brief glances. "Sir, step back now, or we will place you under arrest for interfering with police business." "What seems to be the problem here?" A new voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see Donald Reeves, our neighbor from 3 houses down, approaching with purpose. Don was a retired detective with 30 years on the force, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it. "These officers are shutting down our memorial gathering," I explained, meeting Don's eyes meaningfully. Don nodded slightly, understanding passing between us. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his retired detective badge and ID. "Officers, Don Reeves, County Homicide, retired. Mind if I see your credentials? Professional courtesy." The change in the fake officers was immediate and telling. They stiffened, and the shorter one took an unconscious step backward. "We are actually from county enforcement, not city police," the taller one stammered. "HOA Compliance Division." Don's eyebrows rose. "Interesting. I was not aware the county had deputized HOA enforcement. Let me make a quick call to the captain on duty tonight and verify that." At the mention of contacting actual police, both men seemed to decide simultaneously that their charade was over. The shorter one muttered something about having another call, and they retreated hastily to an unmarked sedan parked down the street. As they drove away, all eyes turned to Karen, who was now frantically trying to appear uninvolved. "I had nothing to do with this," she declared, holding up her hands. "I simply called the community hotline about a code violation. I do not know who those men were." Don approached her slowly. "Karen, impersonating law enforcement is a federal offense. If you hired those men, you could be facing serious charges." "How dare you accuse me?" Karen's voice rose shrilly. "I am the president of this HOA. I was simply following protocol for unauthorized gatherings." But the damage to her credibility was done. Neighbors who had been intimidated by her for years were now watching her with new eyes. The next morning, Don accompanied me to the police station to file a formal report about the fake officers. Though Karen vehemently denied any involvement, it was clear to everyone what had happened. Somehow, though, no direct evidence linked her to the imposters. She had covered her tracks well. When we returned home, I found Elaine sitting motionless by the window, staring out at nothing. But something had changed. The defeated slump of her shoulders was gone. Her eyes, though reddened from tears, held something new, something calculating and cold. "Daniel," she said without looking at me, Do you remember what I used to do before we moved here? A chill ran down my spine. I nodded slowly. Yes, yes, I do. What our neighbors never knew, what no one in our quiet community ever suspected, was that my wife had not always been just an administrative assistant at a consulting firm. For 12 years, Elaine had worked for the Central Intelligence Agency in counterintelligence and logistics. She had left that life behind 5 years ago when Catherine was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition requiring frequent care. That night, after everyone had gone, Elaine opened a lockbox I had not seen in years. I never thought I would need these again, she said quietly, removing a small notebook with coded entries and a hard drive, but some skills you never forget. She powered up an old laptop that had remained untouched in our closet, one with no connection to our home network or any cloud services. Catherine would not want this, I said gently, watching her fingers move swiftly across the keyboard. She always said forgiveness was better than revenge. Elaine paused, her face softening momentarily. This is not about revenge, Daniel. This is about justice. Those men put their hands on me at my sister's memorial. Karen orchestrated that, and I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg. She worked methodically through the night, accessing security camera feeds from around the neighborhood through backdoor methods I did not understand and did not ask about. By dawn, she had compiled a preliminary dossier on Karen Westfield that would have impressed her former handlers at Langley. Karen has been president of the HOA for 7 years, Elaine explained, showing me financial spreadsheets. During that time, the association fees have increased by 68%, supposedly for community improvements, but look at the actual expenditures. The numbers did not add up. Large sums allocated for landscaping, security, and maintenance did not match the services provided. Contractors listed on official documents did not exist when Elaine cross-referenced state business registries. She has been siphoning funds through shell companies, Elaine concluded, and that is just the beginning. Further investigation revealed that Karen had been using the HOA as her personal fiefdom. Residents who opposed her were targeted with selective enforcement of rules. Those who supported her received exemptions from the very same regulations. But the most damning discovery came when Elaine traced the ownership of County Enforcement Solutions, the company that had supplied the fake officers. The company is registered to a Gregory Westfield, she said, bringing up incorporation documents, Karen's cousin. I stared at the evidence in disbelief. She actually hired fake cops to intimidate us. That is a federal offense. It is, Elaine agreed, and she has been careful. There is no direct link between her and the company. She maintains plausible deniability. Over the next few days, Elaine maintained her facade of a grieving sister. She moved through the neighborhood with downcast eyes and a tissue in hand. But beneath that performance, her mind was working with the precision and focus I had not seen since her agency days. She accessed archived HOA meeting minutes, studied patterns of enforcement, and quietly interviewed former board members who had been pushed out under Karen's leadership. A picture emerged of systematic corruption, intimidation, and financial misconduct. Karen has created her own little dictatorship, Elaine said one evening, organizing her findings. And she has been untouchable because no one has the resources or knowledge to investigate properly. What are you planning to do? I asked, both concerned and impressed by my wife's transformation. Elaine looked up from her work, a glint of her old professional focus in her eyes. I am going to do what I was trained to do: infiltrate, gather evidence, and dismantle from within. She outlined her strategy with clinical precision, a multi-phase operation that would expose Karen's entire network of corruption and bring down her power structure permanently. I need you to act normal, she instructed me. Appear cowed and intimidated when you see her. We need her to believe she won, that we are afraid of her now. And what will you be doing? Elaine's expression hardened in a way that reminded me of the woman I had met years ago, the one who could not tell me what her work actually involved. I will be becoming Karen's worst nightmare, she replied, but she will never see me coming. Elaine created a new identity with meticulous attention to detail. Amanda Collins, owner of Sunrise Landscaping Services, emerged complete with business cards, a professional website, and stellar fabricated reviews. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Offer Karen exactly what she wanted, kickbacks and control, while documenting everything. The key is to appeal to her greed and her ego simultaneously, Elaine explained as she prepared for her first meeting with Karen. She needs to believe approaching her was her idea. Under her Amanda persona, Elaine accidentally bumped into Karen at the local coffee shop, casually mentioning landscaping services while admiring Karen's designer handbag. The conversation was brief but effective. 3 days later, Karen called the business number. Ms. Westfield is interested in discussing exclusive landscaping contracts for Oak Ridge Estates, Elaine reported, her voice betraying no emotion as she played the recorded conversation. She emphasized competitive pricing structures and administrative considerations. Administrative considerations, I asked. Kickbacks, Elaine translated flatly. She wants a cut of every contract, standard practice for her, apparently. What followed was a masterclass in intelligence gathering. Elaine met with Karen multiple times, each encounter recorded through specialized equipment from her agency days. She played the part perfectly, deferential, slightly nervous, and eager to please. Karen grew increasingly comfortable, revealing more of her operation with each meeting. The previous landscaper did not understand how things work here, Karen explained during their third meeting at a restaurant outside of town. 15% administrative oversight fee, paid directly to me in cash. The board never sees those invoices. I handle all vendor relations personally. Each conversation was cataloged, transcribed, and added to the growing case file. Elaine set up drop points for the falsified payments, methods that could be traced later but appeared untraceable to Karen. Meanwhile, Elaine contacted Martin Gladwell, a former HOA board treasurer who had resigned abruptly 2 years earlier. Over coffee at a cafe 40 miles from our neighborhood, he finally broke his silence. She threatened to report building code violations that would bankrupt me if I did not resign, he admitted, his hands shaking slightly. She had someone from the county in her pocket. I could not risk it. I have 3 kids in college. Martin provided copies of financial documents he had secretly maintained, proof of discrepancies he had been too afraid to report. Elaine added them to her growing collection of evidence. 3 weeks into the operation, Karen began to sense something was not right. Perhaps Elaine had pushed too hard, or perhaps Karen's natural paranoia had been triggered. Whatever the reason, she began applying pressure. We received 4 violation notices in a single week: improper garbage bin placement, unauthorized garden edging, non-compliant mailbox height, and excessive vehicle presence in our own driveway. She is getting nervous, Elaine observed calmly, filing the notices in her evidence binder. That is good. It means she is making mistakes. The next day, we discovered someone had gone through our trash cans before collection. Items had been sorted through, presumably looking for something incriminating. Daniel, act upset, Elaine whispered when we spotted Karen watching us from her porch. She needs to believe she is intimidating us. I played my part, appearing agitated and concerned as we cleaned up the scattered garbage. Internally, I marveled at my wife's composure. The woman who had been broken by grief just weeks ago was now orchestrating an operation worthy of her CIA training. That night, Elaine showed me the final piece she had acquired, a complete record of every transaction Karen had conducted through her position, obtained from the HOA's accounting software through methods I decided not to ask about. We are almost ready, she said, but we need something definitive, something she cannot escape. The tow truck arrived at 6:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. Without warning or notification, they hooked up our car and began to pull it away from our own driveway. I rushed outside in my bathrobe, demanding an explanation. HOA violation, the driver said mechanically, handing me a work order. vehicle positioned improperly on residential property. The violation notice claimed our car extended 3 inches onto the community easement, an invisible line that could only be determined by professional survey equipment. The fine was $350 plus $75 per day for storage. When I called Karen to protest, her voice was silky with false concern. Rules are rules, Daniel. Perhaps if your wife were not so distracted by her emotional situation, you would pay more attention to community guidelines. That afternoon, Elaine did something unexpected. She walked directly to Karen's house and knocked on the door. I watched nervously from across the street, ready to intervene if necessary. Karen opened the door, surprise quickly replaced by smug satisfaction on her face. Their conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, but several neighbors witnessed it. Elaine stood perfectly straight, her voice too low to hear from a distance, but whatever she said caused Karen's smile to falter momentarily. "What did you tell her?" I asked when Elaine returned. "I simply informed her that I am aware of her methods," Elaine replied calmly, "and that she might want to review her own compliance with federal law regarding impersonation of officers and wire fraud." The public confrontation shifted the neighborhood dynamic. People who had previously avoided us now nodded in solidarity when we passed. Small gestures of support appeared, a casserole on our porch, offers to help with yard work, quiet words of encouragement. Then came the bombshell. An anonymous email circulated through the neighborhood containing an audio recording from the most recent HOA board meeting. Karen's voice was unmistakable as she mocked my wife's grief. "These people think they deserve special treatment because they are sad," she could be heard saying, followed by derisive laughter. "If I allowed emotional displays to dictate HOA policy, we would have garden gnomes and flamingos everywhere." The recording sparked outrage. 3 board members resigned immediately, unwilling to be associated with such callousness. Karen issued a statement claiming the audio was manipulated, but the damage was done. Using her Amanda Collins identity one last time, Elaine visited the HOA's legal office, claiming to need verification of landscaping requirements for a potential contract. While there, she gained access to files that confirmed what we had suspected. Karen had been falsifying board approvals and manipulating meeting minutes for years. "It is enough," Elaine told me that night, organizing the final pieces of evidence. "We have financial fraud, abuse of position, conspiracy to impersonate law enforcement, and documented harassment, but timing is everything." When I asked, Elaine smiled for the first time in weeks, not the warm smile I had fallen in love with, but the calculating expression of an operative who had her target cornered. "The Spring Gala," she replied, "Karen's crowning achievement of the year, the event where she parades her power in front of everyone." The annual Oak Ridge Estates Spring Gala was Karen's pet project, a lavish affair at the clubhouse where she reigned supreme, dictating everything from the menu to the music. It was also the only HOA event attended by every resident, along with local officials and business partners. "Perfect," I said, understanding the strategy: public exposure, maximum witnesses, no escape. "The countdown begins," Elaine said quietly, "and Karen has no idea what is coming." The night of the Spring Gala arrived with perfect weather and impeccable timing. The Oak Ridge Estates clubhouse glowed with expensive decorations as residents arrived in formal attire. Karen greeted everyone at the entrance, resplendent in a designer dress and jewelry, playing the gracious leader. Her smile faltered momentarily when she saw us. Elaine wore a simple black dress, elegant and understated. I remained by her side, nodding politely as we passed Karen without speaking. "She is nervous," Elaine whispered. "She expected us to avoid the event." Inside, the gala progressed according to Karen's carefully planned schedule. Catered hors d'oeuvres circulated on silver trays. A string quartet played in the corner. Board members mingled with residents, reinforcing the illusion of community harmony. At precisely 8:30 p.m., Karen took the podium for her annual address. She spoke glowingly about property values, community achievements, and her own tireless dedication to Oak Ridge Estates. Through careful management and strict adherence to our standards, she proclaimed, we have created an environment where excellence is not just encouraged but required. When she paused for applause, Elaine squeezed my hand and stood up. Without hurry or dramatic gesture, she walked toward the small staging area where the audiovisual equipment was controlled. The young man operating the system looked confused as Elaine whispered something to him, showing him what appeared to be official identification. He nodded quickly and stepped aside. Karen continued, oblivious to what was happening. As we look to the coming year, I am proud to announce several new initiatives that will further enhance our. The large screen behind her suddenly illuminated with spreadsheets and transaction records. Her voice faltered as she turned to look at what had appeared. Excuse me, there seems to be a technical. Elaine had taken a position at the side of the room, a remote control in one hand and a microphone in the other. Please continue, Karen, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the speakers. I believe you were discussing financial management. The room fell silent as Karen's own voice began playing through the sound system. The beauty of this setup is that no one checks the numbers. I create the invoices, I approve the payments, and 15% comes back to me in cash. These idiots would not know financial fraud if it hit them in their perfectly manicured lawns. Karen lunged toward the AV controls. This is obviously fabricated. Shut this down immediately. But Elaine had prepared too thoroughly for any last-minute intervention. The presentation continued automatically, displaying evidence that could not be dismissed. Bank records showing payments from HOA vendors to Karen's personal accounts, forged board signatures on approval documents, and finally, proof of her connection to the fake officers who had disrupted our memorial. Gregory Westfield, owner of County Enforcement Solutions, is Karen's cousin, Elaine explained calmly to the stunned audience. The company provides fake officers for HOA intimidation at a rate of $200 per visit. Pandemonium erupted. Board members who had been unaware of the extent of corruption began shouting questions. Residents demanded explanations. Karen, her face contorted with rage, screamed about slander and threatened lawsuits. Then, the final blow. The clubhouse doors opened to admit 3 individuals in suits, actual law enforcement officers from the County Financial Crimes Unit, accompanied by Don Reeves. Karen Westfield, one of them called out, approaching the podium with a document in hand. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to impersonate law enforcement officers. As Karen was led away in handcuffs, still protesting her innocence and threatening everyone in sight, residents gathered around Elaine, asking questions and offering support. How did you put all this together? Someone asked. Elaine smiled tiredly. Let's just say I have experience in research and investigation. In the aftermath of what became known in the neighborhood as the Gala incident, Oak Ridge Estates underwent a transformation. Karen faced multiple felony charges, held on $500,000 bail as investigators uncovered more evidence of her years-long scheme. The HOA was temporarily disbanded pending a complete audit and restructuring. 2 weeks after the arrest, residents gathered for an emergency community meeting. The atmosphere was drastically different from any previous HOA event, open, collaborative, and genuinely focused on community welfare. We need to rebuild this organization from the ground up, Martin Gladwell announced, having returned to help establish proper financial controls. Transparency and integrity must be our foundation. New board elections were scheduled, with candidates pledging to establish term limits, open financial reporting, and reasonable enforcement of community standards. The era of fear and petty tyranny had ended. At home, Elaine and I finally had space to properly honor Catherine's memory. On a perfect spring morning, we planted a flowering dogwood tree in our front yard, her favorite. Neighbors brought small tokens to place around it, painted stones, wind chimes, small mementos that captured Catherine's spirit. This is what a memorial should be, Elaine said softly as we stood back to admire the tree. Not hidden away, not hushed up, just love remembered. For the first time since her sister's death, Elaine cried without restraint, not the desperate, broken sobs of recent months, but cleansing tears that carried away both grief and tension. I held her as the morning light filtered through the young dogwood's branches. "Catherine would have loved this," she whispered. "She always said you should fight for what is right, not just what is easy." In the days that followed, letters began arriving from neighbors, some from people we had barely spoken to during our 3 years in the community. They shared stories of Karen's intimidation, thanked Elaine for her courage, and offered genuine condolences about Catherine that they had been afraid to express earlier. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, Don Reeves stopped by to deliver an update on the investigation. "They have found over $300,000 misappropriated so far," he reported, "and evidence of similar schemes in 2 other communities where she previously served on HOA boards. She will not be managing any neighborhoods for a very long time." "Thank you for your help, Don," Elaine said sincerely. He shook his head. "I did very little, whatever you did before moving here, and I am not asking for details. It served this community well." After he left, I turned to my wife. "Are you going to miss it, the investigation, the operation?" It must have felt familiar. Elaine considered the question carefully. "Parts of it, yes, the focus, the purpose, but I left that life for a reason. There are other ways to make a difference." The following week, she volunteered to help establish new financial oversight procedures for the restructured HOA, this time using her skills openly, for community benefit rather than covert justice. As spring turned to summer, our neighborhood healed. The dogwood tree grew stronger, putting down roots just as we were putting down new ones in a community that finally felt like home. Sometimes I catch Elaine looking at Karen's now empty house across the street, her expression unreadable. But then she turns back to our home, to our life, to the peaceful community we now share, and smiles. Karen made a critical mistake. She saw a grieving woman and perceived weakness. She never bothered to look deeper, to question who Elaine had been before Oak Ridge Estates, before Catherine's death. She never imagined that the quiet woman planting flowers and mourning her sister had once dismantled entire networks of deception for a living. Some strength lies quiet, waiting, and some justice comes not with a bang but with patient, meticulous precision, the kind that leaves no escape.